Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Becky O'Connor and I come from Tableau, and I actually live in a little town called Stourport-on-Severn, which is in the West Midlands, and to be precise where it actually is, it is there in the UK, which is a considerable distance away from where we are today. So I'll just go back to my home page. So in here I'm actually looking at crimes and crime data within my particular area, and if I look at it on a bubble chart, I can see that the red here is where the closer the crimes are to my house is actually in red. The further away from the red is where there's less, where there is crimes, but it's further away from my house. Although this particular one is only 1.4 miles away. And I could find out where actually this is, and it is actually taking me to Google Maps, where I can see, using Google Earth, exactly where this is. So this is quite close to where I live, but I don't actually know this particular neighbourhood, but apparently there's quite a lot of crimes in this particular area. So if I wanted to know more about this data, rather than what's just been presented to me in this dashboard, I can go and edit my dashboard and see a bit more information. Before I go in to have a look at and try and just pick up any old random columns to find out more information about this, I'm going to use Tableau's artificial intelligence capabilities to actually explain the data. So by clicking Explain Data, it's going to look and analyse that data. It's actually looking at all the columns. There's lots of columns that I've put in this data, not just related to crime data, but also deprivation indexes, population densities, different pieces of information about that geographic location. And it's trying to find out pieces of information that might be of interest, that I might want to then drill down to further and find out exactly what's actually happening. So for starters, it's bringing up the data to do with the columns that's actually in that particular point that I've actually clicked on. And I can go through and see if there's anything that's of interest. The first column was based on the last outcome category, and the last outcome category from a crime data context is to do with what actually happened to that suspect, what was the outcome of that crime activity, what actually happened. But I thought was quite interesting was the index of multiple deprivation had a correlation between that and the number of crimes based on this particular point, and the point I was looking at was antisocial behaviour within a 1.6 mile radius of my house. And it's saying that there's an interesting correlation, so the more deprived, so the more higher ranked you are as far as deprivation is concerned, the more likely you will have antisocial behaviour related crimes in that particular area. And if I wanted to, I can then open that visualisation that's been created for me by Tableau into a Tableau workbook. And in there, I can then further analyse the data. So here's the visualisation that's being created for me. And if I simply move the crime type from the detail into rows, because we were looking specifically at antisocial behaviour, but maybe let's see if there's a correlation across any other crime type, I can see that although there's a key relationship between deprivation and antisocial behaviour, if I look at burglary, is pretty much about the same. So whether or not you live in a deprived area or a not so deprived area in that particular location, it doesn't really have an impact in how many burglaries you have. So I could then use that insight to start building other visualizations using Tableau's sophisticated dashboarding and visualization capabilities. So I know that one of the key impacts of crime in my area was related to deprivation. So what I then did when I built a dashboard to publish to users, I put deprivation ranks in my tooltips to say, well, actually, so I'm looking at a wider area. I'm now looking at the whole of the Midlands now, and I can see that for each constituency within that particular area that I'm focusing on, I can see the average is the black line here, and all of these areas are actually above average in terms of rankings for deprivation. So therefore, that particular area has actually got not much of a problem in terms of deprivation. I can focus on antisocial behaviour, and then I can then see what changes that is. I can then re-look at that tooltip and see, well, actually, let's look at this from an antisocial behaviour point of view. And also in here, as I've hovered over antisocial behaviour, I can see top 5 hotspots for crime. Also, as I clicked on antisocial behaviour, it's changed this line chart. So this line at the bottom is focusing on antisocial behaviour crimes. The grey is actually reflecting the grey here, everything I haven't selected. So it's very easy using set actions within Tableau to select one or more points and for you to see a comparison to what you have selected versus what you haven't selected. And further down on the bottom here, I might focus specifically to a certain area, postcode area. In this case, it's DY9 9G something, and I've got the top 5 postcode hotspots in terms of crime across the top, and along the right hand side I've got some narrative. So I'm parameterizing my narrative based on the data, but putting it in more of a natural language, in more of a descriptive way. So I then could quite easily, so if I just close down my edit mode, I'm not going to save the changes. So I've found some insights. I know that crime, and particularly antisocial behaviour, there's a definite link between antisocial behaviour and crimes in my area. So I then might want to share my dashboard to people, share that insight. So I then can go to my comments, and I've already created a comment here to my colleague Louis, who believes that London is a much better place to live than the West Midlands because he lives there and I don't. And he's kind of saying that, prove it. And I'm now saying, well, actually, there is quite a few crimes near where I live, but it's more in the deprived areas rather than not so deprived areas. It's not region based. It's based on other demographics of that particular area. So then I thought, well, actually, I've looked at crimes where I live, so let's have a look at crimes where I work in London. So if I go back to, let's view crimes in London. And this is now going to take me to another dashboard that's bringing up crimes in the London area. And the default postcode I put at the moment is actually here. So the Olympia, which is here. And these hotspots are all the crimes near here. Okay. I've also may want to look at other things that might go with it, some things that I might want to compare with that location. So I'm focusing within 1.5 mile radius of here, but I've also put it in the same place. I'm actually putting in average property sales. And you may not want to see at the back, but this is Kensington and Chelsea area. And the property prices are very high compared to where I live. But then if you look at the multiple deprivation indices, there's definitely one extremes to the other. So you've got areas here that are quite deprived areas that are below average according to the marker. And then you've got areas here which are well above average. So in this particular area, the deprivation index is quite, the scale is quite different. You get some very deprived areas and some very affluent areas. But I wanted to focus on a particular, maybe some social media data related to crime as well. So if I just close that down. So this, because I don't live in London, I wanted to bring it into a bit of more context of actually what's actually happening. So I've brought in some social media data into Tableau. I've broken up each individual tweet into keywords. And I can click on a keyword, so for instance the word tonight. And then here will give me all the other words where that word was mentioned in the tweet. And I've got some popular retweets and things in here as well. But what I'm actually searching for here is all crime-related data, social media data in London. But how do I know whether this data is actually reliable? What I can do is click on the data details pane. The data details button will tell me where this data has actually come from. It tells me all the fields that I've actually used. It tells me the data sources that I've used. And if I click on the data source, I can see exactly how I've configured that data source. And this is using Tableau's data management capabilities. This is taking me straight to the data catalogue. I can see the fields, if there's any descriptions to describe those individual fields, I can see all that in there. I can see that data source is actually being created originally by 3 databases, a Postgres one, an Excel flat file, and also a Tableau hyperfile. If I go to the next stage of the lineage, it's been created by 5, it's pointing to 5 tables. And that's then being brought together by a single prep flow using Tableau Prep. And then going to the overview of Tableau Prep, in Tableau Prep Builder, I can see how a user in Tableau Prep Builder has constructed the flow. So we may have started, so these are the original data sources, and I've actually, you can't see from here because the screen's quite small, but you can see how you've constructed sentiment, where all the tables are joined together, so you can see these joins. These are steps where I've made tweaks to the data, and I can see every step in the flow, which ultimately gives me these outputs. And those outputs then lead to the data source, which is this one here, tweets with keywords. So I know exactly I can trust this data source. So I've had a look at some social media data. We had a quick look at crime data looking at the postcode of here. And I just wanted to look at more of a residential postcode. But I don't live in London. And my only personal connection of London apparently is my great grandmother, Louisa Wilson, who, according to the 1911 census, I drill into that, she actually lived in Bethnal Green. So I thought, well, let's have a look at data within a mile or half a mile radius of the postcode that she would have lived in had postcodes had been around at that time. So obviously I had a look and found out what the postcode of 52 Hague Street would be. And I've now recalibrated my visualization to show data around that postcode. So if I close that down, first of all, I've changed my social media tweets. So I'm actually looking at anything where Bethnal Green has been mentioned. And I can see the keywords, I can see the retweets, etc., etc. And if I open up my crime data now, I can now see the number of crimes within Bethnal Green. So here on the left is looking at population density versus number of crimes. So it's a kind of a basic calculation, taking population according to the 2011 census, not the 1911 one. And I've divided that by the number of crimes, which then gives me a ratio of how likely or not likely I, according to that population density, would be involved in a crime had I be living in the same place as my great-grandmother. I might want to click on certain areas, so I've also got who voted to leave in the referendum or not, whether that has an impact or not. Probably not, but I thought it was quite fun to have that in there. Property sales. I could click on a particular area, multiple deprivation. Let's just find that some multiple deprivation area, and that then zooms into an area that was actually highlighted in red. So because it's highlighted in red, it's actually a particular deprived area. And this, again, using Tableau set actions, I can see a comparison of what I've selected, which is the orange, versus everything else in terms of that ratio of what I haven't selected. I can see the individual crime locations on a map in here. So I'm zooming right down using the mapping capabilities. And all of this is around antisocial behaviour. I could zoom back out. I can say, let's view the whole of London. So I can press yes to view all of London. And that's now going to change the map to view everything in London. You might parameterize the geospatial polygons to say, well, actually, if I'm viewing all of London, I don't want to put in every single LSOA polygon in there because it will make those polygons very small. So I've done it by local authority region instead in this example. But if there's something on the dashboard that maybe I may want to ask data, really, I want to find out a bit more, and maybe I'm not somebody who knows Tableau extremely well to start creating my own visualizations by dragging and drop columns onto the screen, I can simply use Tableau's Ask Data capabilities, where I can start asking questions about crime data in natural language. So here's the Ask Data functionality, so I can now start asking questions. So first first of all, I've got some questions suggested questions of what I can ask. So before I start typing anything in, it's actually giving me a suggestion. EU referendum results, percentage, or whether or not they're going to leave or not. Now, before anybody says, actually, that's not the right percentage, this doesn't actually include Scotland, which is why the percentage is slightly out. However, maybe I might want to say who voted to leave in London, as an example. I'll just type in London, and that's now reduced that percentage to just 40%. We could then do this by outcode as a map. And that's actually then creating a new visualization to see it by outcode as a map. If I wanted to create a new one, so those of you who are familiar with Tableau, and you're familiar with the whole worksheets and creating worksheets to form a workbook and then bringing it all together into dashboards, that's exactly what this is doing, but using as data. So I could bring a number of crimes. That's another example. Number of crimes in London. I could do this over time. And it will intelligently find a date-based parameter and outspread crimes over time. And it's intelligently put as a line chart. I could then duplicate this and say, I could do it over time, but I just want to do in Bethnal Green. And that's now going to reduce the crimes because I'm just focusing on Bethnal Green. Let's duplicate it again. Because as we go along, we might want to save our insights. And then finally, I might want to say, rather than by month, that brings us back to 10,000 crimes in Bethnal Green. We could do this in 2018. Okay. And we do this by crime type. And this is now going to create a bar chart looking at all of these types of crimes. So, as you can see, it started to build up a Tableau workbook with all of these worksheets in here. So I could just simply save my workbook, and then I can then go and start doing some more tweaking to it. So this is the saved workbook. I've got crimes over time within Bethnal Green, and I've also got a bar chart as well. But I might want then to compare that, my crimes in London, versus the crimes where I live at home. So in Tableau, you can bring in multiple data sources that have also been curated and have gone through the data catalogue. I can see the first one, it says crimes in the West Midlands. There's an I here. And the I is saying, basically don't use it because it's been deprecated. Don't use this data source anymore. But what it's saying, there's a little green tick here. Can't see it very well at the back. There's a little green tick there saying, this is a certified data source, so use this one. You can trust it. So I'm going to connect to that new data source, and then I'm going to put in crimes, number of crimes in the West Midlands, and then I can then compare that together to see that on a like-by-like basis. And I can filter again to say the neighbourhood, say the neighbourhood code is Swindon or Stourport or wherever I live. Okay. So as as you start building, and you can create the formatting. So I've done a little bit more in this one that I've done just a little bit further editing. So I've just changed the colours to reflect the different areas, crimes in Stourport versus crimes in Bethnal Green. And then finally, I end up with a piece of analysis that says, see, there's more crimes in Bethnal Green, which is in London, compared to where I live. And so obviously it's more to do with deprivation. It's got nothing to do with the actual region of where I live. So you can then close that down, save that, and then collaborate that and share that with your colleagues. However, if we go move down the line a bit further, so just if I go and view the comments on this page, it's basically saying you must look at this view the population per crime figures, please. And Louis, my colleague, is basically saying, hope you are insured. I think this one's gone a bit funny. So basically it's saying that although the crimes, if I just go and edit this, although the population, all the number of crimes is greater in London, when you look at population data, if I look at burglary, I have more chance of being burgled where I live compared to where my great-grandmother lived in Bethnal Green, which had quite a good low deprivation score. So I'm quite pleased to say that I have my German Shepherd, Boris, who frightens away all the burglars, and I can safely say I've never been burgled in Stourport yet. But also what I wanted to say is, within Tableau, I've just taken you through the entire platform today in a space of 30 minutes. In terms of deployment, I've deployed this server on Tableau using Amazon Web Service on Linux. You could use Windows. For data access, I've used Postgres SQL Server. I've used extracts as well. I've used Tableau Builder in terms of preparing all of that data within prep and then publishing it. I've used the data catalog facility to ensure that there's proper data governance. I'm using data lineage, so an end user can go and have a look at the data and they can see where that data's actually come from. I've used Prep Conductor, so I can schedule the flow within Prep Conductor and on a scheduled basis, and I know the last time that data was refreshed. I've used some analytical features. I've used Ask Data, asking questions in natural language. I've used ad hoc analysis within the web authoring capabilities. I've created calculations. I've used Explain Data to get Tableau to explain interesting things in my data before I start delving into it myself. And all of this, as a viewer, I've used the interactivity features, the mapping, the visualizations, and then I finally published my data, published my information onto Tableau server, where I can collaborate and add comments. And ultimately, all of that I've done in a single browser on one single platform, which is the Tableau platform. So, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.